You're listening to the LA Football Podcast.
And welcome back, Los Angeles. This is the LA Football Show right here on the LA Football Network, live on the Mightier 1090 ESPN Radio. It is time for Rams Talk. Rams fans have been waiting patiently, as per usual, since, 2016, when Jared Goff was drafted, have not had a first-round pick since. So they are used to relaxing and just enjoying the draft on Thursday, and they can start biting their nails and sweating a little bit on Friday when those picks finally do come. As it currently stands at the time of this recording, the Rams sit at pick 36 in the second, 69 and 77. So 3 picks currently here on Friday. Would not surprise me in the slightest if there is a trade down to get more picks, as that is what the Rams love to do. Sitting at 11, I wouldn't be shocked if they have a total of 14 when it's all said and done. But Jamal, just to start off, pick 36, the closest they've had to the first round probably since 2016, almost feeling like a first round pick. It's feeling even more like a first round pick because of how the board has fallen. I mean, the talent left on the board for this Rams team, specifically at defense, is actually phenomenal. I was with Skinny T yesterday, and we were joking since Will McDonald went, I think, 15 overall to the Jets. All right, I guess it's Nolan Smith to the Rams at 36, and he almost happened. He fell to like 31 to the Eagles. And so it almost came to fruition, but still a lot of talent there. So we want to get all into that quickly. Show, as always, brought to you by our friends at BetOnline. Head to betonline.ag. Use our promo code BELIEVE. That's BLEAV. Gets you a 50% welcome bonus. Throw a bet right now on the Rams, what they're going to take at 36, if they're going to trade back, if they're going to go with one of these defensive guys, or that'll lead me to my first question, Jamal, before we get into what they should do. And maybe you think this is what they should do. But currently, on BetOnline, on all the sports books, the number one odds to take first round graded by many quarterback out of Kentucky, Will Levis, number one odds are the Rams to take him. Now, sportsbooks are not always right, obviously, but that is telling that they have skyrocketed the Rams to those odds. Your thoughts on the Rams taking Will Levis?
Yeah, I mean, it's the intrigue now, Ryan. It's, you never thought you'd have this guy on the board, and there has to be, at some point, a Stafford contingency plan here, especially when you look at the Rams probably have the worst backup quarterback room in the NFL right now. And so
they don't have anyone.
They don't have anyone. And especially when you factor in Stafford's age, the contemplation of retirement, the injury bug now, when it came to sort of the neck stingers, spinal issues, shoulder issues, at some point you have to sort of make a call to say, we need somebody back there in terms of reinforcements to stabilize this team. Now, the question is, A, do you believe enough in Will Levis to be that guy? And B, given how this team has sort of set up the remodel, is backup quarterback really the thing you need day one of camp and day one of the season to be able to field a full roster? And so if I work my way backwards here in terms of these questions, Ryan, it's not, okay? There's so many other positions of need, so many other issues here. You're rolling out with Stafford day one. He's your guy. He's one of the 3 pillars that is still standing in this entire remodel. And then secondly, is Will Levis somebody that can genuinely be the future franchise quarterback of the Rams? And I wonder, Ryan, you and I have sort of talked a lot about what it takes for NFL college quarterbacks to be great at the NFL level. And I've always said that a vast majority of quarterbacks at the college level and who have ended up being great in the NFL were guys that took non-blue chip schools and elevated them significantly. Took a 4-win team and made them a 9-win team. Took a 5-win team and take them to 11 wins in a New Year's 6 bowl. And so, when you look at the Mahomes and the Josh Allens and the Lamar Jacksons and on the list we go, Aaron Rodgers. I mean, you see Texas Tech, you see Wyoming, you see Cal, you see Louisville. So it's not exactly a who's who of universities from a football perspective that are the best quarterbacks in the NFL. Now, having said that, if you do come from a blue chip school, you have to sort of take advantage of all of the position positional advantages at your disposal, whether it's offensive line, whether it's receiver, whether it's running back, and the whole deal, and just destroy everybody else. And that's kind of what Joe Burrow did with LSU, right? He had all of the advantages and had arguably the greatest quarterback season in the history of college football. When I look at Will Levis, I don't really see either archetype. He was a guy that was in a non-blue chip school. Kentucky sort of had its moments, particularly in 2021 when Levis was more healthy, sort of had their moments, but he didn't really elevate that team necessarily. And then last year, a number of key turnovers, key misjudgments in close games. Now, granted, he was hurt. He didn't have the same level of offensive line. He didn't have the same level of weapons. But then again, it sort of feeds into that notion where if you're truly a great NFL player, you have to be able to overcome some of that at the college level and still find a way to win. So to me, I actually think NFL teams have been really smart in not burning too high a pick on Levis, because I was never really a Will Levis guy. I never really saw what everybody else presumably saw in him as being this elite prospect. So having said all of that, if Branch is on the board, Ryan, it's got to be Branch, I mean, and you get that safety, you get that anchor, especially given how young the Rams are at corner, all of the turnover that's taking place. You still have Aaron Donald on the front end. You only run a one backer system. You really need someone to sort of fortify that back end and start putting the necessary anchors in place to have a really nice roster, both offensively and defensively. And when you look at Branch, if he's sitting there, mid-30s, that might be the steal of the draft. So to me, it's Branch all the way if he's sitting there.
Oh, yeah, home run. To go back to Levis quick, because I agree with you. First of all, just the prospect, and I don't want to get misquoted here. I'm not comparing him in terms of even play style or talent level. I'm just comparing more towards situationally. But it gives me a similar vibe to Paxton Lynch back in, 2016. Smaller school in terms of football school, comes out of Memphis. Great intangibles, big arm, big body, has some flashes on film, but couldn't quite overcome certain things. The big red flag to me with Paxton Lynch was, I remember watching him in his final season and showed some really good things, but in that final bowl game against Auburn, against elite defense that he was going to see in the NFL, just looked, in my opinion, horrible. I think he threw like 4 interceptions that game. And the talk was like, oh, he was just trying to put the team on his back. Like he didn't have the same talent to go against him, but it showed some red flags to me. And I think Levis showed that sometimes throughout his final year, was trying to use his talent to overcome some of his other deficiencies in a will. And I'm not trying to bring him down. Like this is a big moment for him and he's going to get drafted. But that's why I don't personally think he should be seen as this elite level prospect that's going to supplant Stafford and take the Rams back to the promised land. I just don't see that. And so for that reason, I wouldn't take him anyway. The second reason I wouldn't take him is if the Rams, Les Snead and Sean McVay, truly believe this is a remodel year and not a rebuild year, you're not taking a quarterback with your first pick in the draft because you have so many needs on defense. You have 3 returning starters total between Donald, Jones, and Fuller. 2 of the 3 which were out for almost the entirety of the season last year due to injury. So essentially 1 returning 2022 starter. So you have a lot of stuff to fill on that side of the ball. You have obviously some depth on offensive line. You are going to take a quarterback at some point, but if you're taking Will Levis at 36, that tells me you actually believe this is a rebuild year and you're basically packing it in to prepare for 2024 with the hopes that Will Levis is the future of your franchise, which I don't think they believe. So the odds makers can say one thing. If the Rams do that, then they're doing something different than they've been saying all offseason long, which to their credit, they do a lot of different misconception things. But to me, that would be a total 180 based on what they've been saying and leaning into in terms of what this offseason looks like. Because I know a lot of fans think it's a rebuild, but based on everything McVay and Snead has said, this is a remodel, but taking a quarterback first as your first pick, that's a rebuild then.
No, Ryan, it's completely right. And I think there's one other dimension to that. And you said it so perfectly because it's a misalignment of, again, what they are saying they're doing and what they actually do. But I think the third level of why you don't take Will Levis here is you're also going to be comparing him to the 24 prospects, right? Yeah. The 24 draft prospects. And in a situation where the Rams will then finally kind of get back, in the first round. Now, no one is going to think that Caleb Williams is going to be around for the Rams to even have attainability there. But when you look at who's coming back at the collegiate level, even in the Pac-12, when you look at Michael Penix Jr., when you look at Bo Nix, when you look at DJ Uliungalale, when you look at all of these talents here at the Pac-12 level,
Drake
when
May.
you look at Hartman out of Notre Dame, when you just look at all of these guys that are coming back, Levis really going to be better than all of those guys, because you can just wait a year and go get your quarterback next year, depending on how this thing plays out. So, A, you don't need him this year. B, he might not be that good. And then C, you really have to not just compare him to this year's group, but you got to compare him to next year's group, given the timeline of the remodel. So for all of those reasons, I think it would be a huge whiff and a gigantic error in judgment from Les Snead if they end up taking Will Levis. I've been really low, Ryan, you know this, on the Chargers pick. This would be worse, if the Rams took Levis at 36 than the Chargers with Johnstone at 21.
Yeah, and you said something very, very smart there, as you always do. But in terms of looking to the future and not just this year, and the Titans have done some very questionable things lately, most notably trading A.J. Brown on draft day last year and then picking a receiver in Treylon Burks when they had a better version of him on their roster already. But they did something smart this year in the sense that everyone knows that, Ryan Tannehill's getting up there in age. He's kind of fallen off in terms of where he was just even 2 years ago. So obviously he's not going to be the future of that franchise. And Will Levis was sitting there for the Titans. And a lot of people originally thought the Titans may move up all the way to 3 in trade with the Cardinals. They end up not. They must have been too rich of a deal to move up. They stand pat. They have Will Levis available to them. They decide to draft the tackle out of Northwestern and say, you know what? We know this year we're probably not going to do a whole lot, but we have Tannehill still. We did take Malik Willis last year, who hasn't shown a whole lot, but maybe he's still developing. Why reach on this quarterback here and then just basically force us to force start Levis at some point when let's plan for next year's QB class, take someone that can be a stalwart on our offensive line and set us up for that. And so the Rams almost want to take notes on that, which I'm sure they are. And they're thinking this way, hopefully, is exactly what you said. Like, why force yourself to take a QB that you're then going to be essentially forced to start in the next year or two when you still have Stafford, who we think can play at an elite level for another year or two at least. And then you have next year's QB class that, barring anything crazy, is going to be a very, very good and deep QB class, which, again, Caleb Williams is probably out of the question unless they have a bad year and then also trade up to that number 1 pick. But I think that would be the smart move. So yeah, it makes no sense taking Will Levis here. Nothing the Rams do shock me, Jamal, but this would be one they would mystify me quite a lot.
The only other plausible scenario there, Ryan, to draft a Will Levis is to then potentially parlay that into a trade with a team that really needs a quarterback and figure, hey, maybe we can make this trade and then get even more picks on the back end because we're just so sort of roster lean right now and we just need more picks and we need more shots on goal. So that would be the only semblance of an argument that I could think of to go and do that. The problem with that is that every team has passed on him, So if he really was the guy that you wanted, everybody had a shot to get Will Levis and everyone chose not to. So again, I just don't see it. It's great that Vegas is doing that. I think they're bringing a lot of buzz and excitement. And of course, the QBs are always going to be headline. But there are just so many other needs that the Rams have and so many better players that are within the Rams' sights to go use that pick on.
And the last scenario, and then we'll move on, would be exactly what you said, but flipped. If they truly believe in Will Levis, drafting him and then trading Matthew Stafford to a QB needy team potentially, or a team that is just a QB away. I'm trying to think of examples. They would never trade in division to the Niners, but a team of that ilk that is has all the pieces. They just have question marks at quarterback and they don't want to develop one like the Rams did, 2 years ago in what they did in trading for Matthew Stafford. So I don't see that happening, but that would be the only other thought process, is that would be what they were thinking, is we believe in Will Levis enough that, and there was talks yesterday that they were on the phones potentially moving up in the first round, or at least fielding calls, or at least seeing. Now, I don't know if that was for Will Levis, which is probably hearing that why the odds makers moved it up. I don't think it would be for him. It was probably for maybe like a Nolan Smith or someone that was still sitting there. And they thought that they could go get him in terms of where they would have to move up to or how much it would cost. But yeah, we'll see. It's going to be an interesting, but
let's get an interesting scenario, Ryan, that you posed. And, and again, I think I think it's a really nice strategy actually, but I don't think Levis is the guy you do that for.
Exactly.
You would go do that for Bryce Young. You'd go do that for CJ Stroud. I could even see a world where you would do that for Anthony Richardson, just given how the measurables are just so off the charts. And if anybody can sculpt him, in a Michelangelo-esque way into a great quarterback, it would be Sean McVay. So I could even see it there. And then maybe you go trade Stafford to, say, the Dolphins, for instance, with all of those offensive weapons that they have. And given his big arm and Tua's injury history and with the concussions. So, I could see that kind of play out, but I just don't think there's anything that Levis does that sort of jumps off the page where like, we have to have this guy. This is our guy to build over the next 6, 7, 8 years.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll see. So let's, for the last, few minutes here, and then we'll run it over into the final segment here. Let's look at what the Rams should actually do. Too much Will Levis talk and what they do. And I pulled up a mock draft simulator that's not going to be perfect, but it will give us some options with some names to play with. And so, of course, Jamal, the first 4 picks went about as well. It didn't go as bad because 2 guys we don't want went. So it kept a lot of good guys on the board. But Brian Branch went at 32 to the Steelers. Will Levis went to the Cardinals at 33. Joey Porter Jr. at 34. And then Hendon Hooker goes to the Colts, which I cannot see that happening considering they drafted Anthony Richardson. So I don't know what this simulator is doing, taking back-to-back quarterbacks for the Colts. So we can throw that out the window. That's not happening. But that leaves on the board for the Rams, Michael Mayer, who I know you loved for the Chargers. Is he a fit for the Rams? Osiris Torrance, great offensive lineman out of Florida. You have Darnell Washington if you want to go a big body tight end. You got Tyler Higbee entering the last year of his deal. And let me throw one more at you here that could be interesting. Let's go either Cam Smith or DJ Turner, both corners, one out of South Carolina, one out of Michigan. So, I'll throw last one just because he's our guy. Zach Charbonnet is still there. So do the Rams go offense even with who they have at running back? So we got like 3 minutes. So we can at least start with that, and then we'll maybe do the final 2 picks on the bottom. So do you want me to rename those or you got them all on top of mind?
No, I got them all top of mind, Ryan. For me, the decision would be between Michael Mayer and DJ Turner. And I think that just given, when you start talking about the idea of the remodel and what you need around this team moving forward, Michael Mayer is a first-round talent. There is just no question about it in my mind. And when you look at his body and his hands and his ability to get open and his ability to shed defenders and his ability to eat up space and his ability to block, all of those things to me, it's just screaming Michael Mayer, especially when you talk about the Higbee contract situation, especially when you're talking about how he complements a Cooper Kupp and a Van Jefferson in that slots 1 and 2, gives Stafford now another weapon to look at. And I think that we love Benny Skrull. We love Higbee. Those are serviceable guys in their roles. But what was the big concern last year? Obviously, offensive line number 1, health number 2. But it was that Stafford just doesn't have a rapport, doesn't trust anybody else besides Cooper Kupp. And we're just getting so stagnant on offense, so predictable. Mayer is that big body security blanket that can start sort of moving the chains and get this Sean McVay offense up and going again in a very significant way. To me, Mayer is obviously the pick there. And then if for any reason that doesn't materialize, he gets taken off the board, I really like DJ Turner as well. And again, solidifying that back end. There's some young corners back there, but really needing to start getting physical, especially when you look at who is in this division that the Rams have to go through. We've talked about so much how bare the quarterback room is in the NFC West. But when you look at wide receiver ones in the NFC West and just physical dudes, I mean, DK Metcalf, Deebo Samuel, Hopkins. I mean, it's sort of a murderer's row here, a who's who of number ones. You have to be able to have a physical corner there to put up some resistance, or you're just going to get carved up like a Thanksgiving turkey. So for me, it's clearly Mayer just because of the prospect. I mean, there was so much talk about Mayer going potentially before Kincaid. Kincaid went at 24, and a lot of people thought that was too low for Kincaid. I mean, you're looking at potentially a top 18, 20 pick that if he's there at 36, the BPA is just, exploding there that you have to take. And then if that doesn't work, given need, given matchup in your division, I'd go DJ Turner.
Yeah, I mean, Michael Mayer, it's very surprising he's still even available in not even in his mock draft, but in just real life going into the second round here, not being taken at first. And so it definitely would not be a bad pick by any means. Everything you said, the talent, what he adds as a skill position player, what he adds in the running game, almost being a sixth offensive lineman. So, but we got to take a quick break. So I'll give my thoughts after the break. We'll make a selection and then we'll move on to round 3 for the Rams and wrap this thing up. This is the LA Football Show. Be right back after the break. And welcome back, Los Angeles, to the LA Football Show. Final segment here on radio, ESPN 1090, The Mightier. And we're wrapping up here with Rams Talk on podcast. We're in the final actual draft stages for our Rams, getting to make a pick on Friday and talking how they can do. So we're going to make a selection here at their pick 36. If they do not trade back, we're talking Michael Mayers, if he's still available. Jamal talked a lot about, DJ Turner out of Michigan. And so what I was going to say about Michael Mayer, Jamal, is agree with everything you said. I would absolutely not be upset by the pick. For me, if they do not trade back here, it would just be hard for me to not go defense just with how many needs they have. And we've talked all the time. I hate when teams have to draft for need. That's not a great strategy, but unfortunately with the way the offseason went, the Rams are going to be drafting for need because they have 3 returning starters on defense, as we mentioned earlier. And so to me, Michael Mayer is more of a luxury, whereas someone like a Cam Smith or a DJ Turner is more of a necessity. And if that luxury seems to outweigh long-term the necessity, I totally get it, because if Michael Mayer becomes a George Kittle-like tight end, obviously that is irreplaceable in what George Kittle adds that offense and potentially what Michael Mayer could add to this Sean McVay offense. So I totally understand that. But sitting here on a Friday, just looking at the 2023 season and what the needs are, I would have to go with one of the defenders on the board. I like DJ Turner's great. I would personally go Cam Smith. We had a great Gamecock talk last episode, and so I would go with the Gamecock here, Cam Smith. I would not be upset at all by DJ Turner. But for those reasons, I would probably lean with one of the corners here. I'm going to throw one more name at you and let you talk about it first. I'm going to throw 3 more names at you, but defensive line now.
Love it.
And you look at the availability of our guy, Tuli Tuipulotu. You have Adebawore out of Northwestern or BJ Ojalaria out of LSU. Do any of those 3 names entice you more than the corners and Mayer?
Ojalaria. I think he's a stud. I love Tuli Tuipulotu. And, we've covered him a ton. And obviously he led the Pac-12 in sacks last year, Pac-12 Defensive Player of the Year. I don't know if Tuipulotu is the physical specimen that is required to be an elite pass rusher in the NFL. And I think that a lot of what Tuipulotu was able to do last year at the collegiate level was off of just smarts and intelligence and spacing and knowing and being able to read kind of offensive lines and, being at the right place at the right time and just sort of having a nose for the football. Obviously, incredible skills to have at the next level, but he doesn't do anything that sort of jumps off the page physically. And so that would just be my one hesitation is he was able to get to his spots in college, but it's sort of a different game in the NFL. It's the equivalent here would be like in basketball when you have a great college player who can kind of get his shot off the dribble in college, but he can't get his shot off the dribble in the NBA because the windup is too long, the handle isn't quite as tight, and the defense is just, better. And so that's kind of how I feel a little bit about Tuipulotu. Ojalaria was an absolute freak specimen and continues to be, and really was a significant linchpin in how LSU was able to turn their season around and get into that double-digit win column. everybody forgets, I mean, that LSU, obviously the Tennessee-Alabama game got so much publicity last year as arguably the game of the year in college football. But everyone forgets that LSU clipped Alabama in Death Valley. Ojalaria was a huge reason why. He made Bryce Young's life very uncomfortable in that game, really had Alabama sort of off schedule, behind the chains more often than they would want to be, and really kept them on their heels for a large part of that game that allowed LSU to stay in that game and let their offense sort of be able to grow into having the necessary momentum to win that game. So when I look at him against elite competition, and it doesn't get any more elite at the collegiate level than Alabama, Ojalaria to me is the guy that he's got, sort of my attention there. And I think given what the Rams need, when you talk about fortifying some depth around Aaron Donald and then also bringing in a guy that can get to the quarterback from a rush perspective and sort of bring that complement to Aaron Donald, Ojalaria is definitely very high on that list and checks all of those boxes.
Yeah, I agree. We talked about Ojalaria a few segments ago with the Chargers potentially getting him. It would be after this 36 pick if he falls. I don't know if he will fall. That seems not likely, but however, the way the first round went, you never know. I do like Adebawore a lot as well out of Northwestern. Saw him at the Combine. Obviously, the Combine doesn't mean a whole lot in my opinion, but he did test very, very well at the Combine, in the tight Olympics, if you will. I agree with everything you say on Tui Pelotu. Love him, but I just think in terms of what you need at that position at this point in the draft, it fits better with an Ojulari or an Adebawore. I'd be fine with either of those guys. So let me ask you this, because we'll lock in a pick. Are you taking one of the edge guys? Are you taking a corner? Or are you going Mayer? We'll lock it in and move to the third round. And this is what I'll say as you're thinking. I would personally probably lean one of these edge guys just because the edge drop-off is a cliff when we get to that third, fourth round. I think the corners have a little more depth, although I love these top two corners in Cam Smith and DJ Turner, but I think we can get a good, solid guy in that third round, whereas edge, you're having a pretty substantial drop-off depending how the board goes. And then obviously Michael Mayer, I know you love, but me personally, I think we got to go defense here.
Yeah, I mean, I think you gave me the Mayer DJ Turner comp, and I went Mayer. I think when you factor edge in, I'd go Ojalaria as the pick here, and for all of the reasons that you laid out. Again, necessity versus luxury, and just kind of filling out this roster. I completely agree with you. With one caveat, right? Mm-hmm. I would take Mayer if I also believe that I could trade Mayer for a team that has a better edge rush prospect than Ojulari, or someone who's higher on my board, or kind of a can't miss guy in the secondary. So that would be sort of the one caveat. If we're just going pick for pick in terms of need, yes, I think Ojularia is the guy. But I think if Mayer can be used as trade bait to get someone higher on the board at either edge or corner, then I would still take Mayer from a BPA, best player available perspective, and then use that as a bargaining chip.
Gotcha. So, okay. All right. So what do you want to do here? Do you want to go the BPA or do you want to go with the more needed?
No, I'll go Ojalaria.
Okay. I will lock that in. And I think that's smart too, because, similar to our Will Levis conversation, every team to this point did pass on Mayer. So who knows what that trade market now, obviously it's a very different position, and there's teams that had maybe needs over tight end, but hey, if they could add a tight end like Mayer, but they're drafting farther back, there'd be a lot more interested parties than say there would be for a Will Levis, because quarterback's the premium and everyone passed on it. So I do agree with you that there could be something there, but we'll go with Ojalaria. So we get the edge there for the Rams. And again, I would expect the Rams at some point on Friday to trade back in some capacity, but we'll just do it. There are 3 picks here for the sake of time. So we got 2 remaining picks, 69, 77. Here at 69. Now, to me, let's give you.
What are my options?
Let me give you 3 names. So I'll give you 2 corners. I'll give you a receiver. And what other position do you think is a smart one to go here? Running back, defensive line, interior.
Yeah, I'd look at
tight
interior D line, and then I'd look at receiver as well.
Okay, so receiver seems like every mock has these guys falling, surprisingly, but Tank Dell or Marvin Mims.
Okay.
Corner, which we passed on in the second. These are two phenomenal picks. Clark Phillips or Tomlinson out of TCU. And then you want defensive interior?
Defensive interior. Yeah, let's see.
You got, let's go with Kobe Turner out of Wake Forest. I like Gerard Clark, but I think that's going to be a reach there in the third. Let's just go Kobe Turner. So that's your defensive interior guy.
I feel really good about this pick, and it's Clark Phillips. And I think that just that opportunity. I mean, Clark Phillips is arguably the best cover corner in the whole draft. I mean, there is a very very credible argument to make about that. And if you can get him with at the position that you're at in the mid-second round there, that's an absolute steal. And so you sort of get your edge rush needs with Ojalaria. You go get Clark Phillips. I mean, he absolutely locked up Jake Bobo, made Jordan Addison's life really difficult, and was just so physical with even all those great Oregon receivers when they went up to Eugene. Just Clark Phillips is just every bit the great true number one corner that you need. Aggressive, great with his hands, great with his hips, rotates on defense, it turns his head around at the right situations, just tactically really good, mechanically really good. And again, when you factor in who are the receiver ones in this division, I mean, Clark Phillips is a perfect fit for this team. To me, this one is a no-brainer, Clark Phillips in this spot.
Yep, we're on the same page here. As much as I like Tomlinson out of TCU, we've talked about him a lot over the last week. If Clark Phillips falls to this spot at this pick, I think it's an absolute no-brainer. You run that in, this would be a home run for the Rams. I'm not saying he's going to be as good as Jalen Ramsey, but you do replace the ilk of Jalen Ramsey with a very young, talented corner that can become your true number one corner for many, many years to come. So I wouldn't even think twice about it. Clark Phillips at the beginning of the third round is a absolute no-brainer here. So we'll lock that in before we wrap up the show. And, just a few picks later, again, I do think the Rams will probably trade back at some point, but here they are now. Round 3, pick 14, final pick on Friday. What are you position-wise, before I give you names? We went edge, we went corner. Now, what do you kind of want to lean into? Obviously, depending on the board, but just based on position of need or position of luxury you'd like to see, and then I'll give you some names.
Yeah, I think, I'd like to see sort of where we are with backer and then kind of interior line and then receiver. Those would probably be the 3 I'd filter.
All right, so let's do that. So we got receiver, we got linebacker, and we've got...
And let's throw RB in there too. Just, those are the 4.
RB, and you said interior offensive line or defensive line? Or both?
Interior offensive line, sorry.
Offensive line. All righty. So, receiver, Tank Dell, Marvin Mims, still there.
Wow, still there.
I mean, the fact that they're there, it might be hard to pass on just because of
the
elite talent there being this late. So those are your 2 receivers. Michael Wilson, I actually like a lot out of Stanford, but I wouldn't take him over Dell or Mims, but I do like Michael Wilson if that's a guy. Running back, I could list other ones, but I mean, the fact that Tajay Spears is sitting here is pretty unbelievable, in my opinion.
Oh, wow. This is going to be hard now.
Tajay, well, yeah, I guess it's not unbelievable, but yeah, Tajay Spears here in the mid-third round is your running back. And then interior offense or linebacker, let's go with, we got Dorian Williams, linebacker out of Tulane, or we got Ivan Pace out of Cincinnati. Those are probably your top graded linebackers. I'll throw another name at you for running back. I wouldn't take him over Tajay Spears, but Deuce Vaughn could be very fun in this offense. I'll just throw the name out there. So we got the 2 receivers, the 2 linebackers, 2 running backs, and then interior offensive line. We're looking at Juice Scruggs out of Penn State, center, or John Gaines. Obviously, we know him very well, guarded UCLA. We love John. Might be a little bit of a reach here at 77. But those are your top kind of interior guys on the line. Well, I missed one here. Anthony Bradford out of LSU. Andrew Voorhees on the board. Again, there's the injury history, or not history, but the recent injury. So those are kind of your top rated interior
Ryan,
offensive line.
this is a really tough one for me. Ultimately, it comes down to Tyjae Spears and Tank Dell. And I think that the conversation here is no kidding. Let's put the BS aside finally after 2 years. Do we believe in Tutu Atwell or not?
Yep.
And so that's the conversation that Les Snead and Sean McVay need to have and say, is he a Ram? Is he a credible number 3 wide receiver? Is he a credible speed guy? Does he give us what we need or not? And the rubber has sort of met the road. And I think if he does, then you go Tyjae Spears for, just the versatility that he brings to the table, his burst. He is a guy who can mix it up in the interior. He's got the burst to take it as a home run. He catches out of the backfield. He's quick. He's fast. He's agile. I mean, just all the things that McVay could do with him and a Kyren Williams moving forward, you salivate there. And then, Tank Dell, obviously that level of talent, given where he is probably the BPA at that particular point in time. But to me, it comes down to the Tutu conversation. And are you ready to sort of, make a decision or move on from that decision? And just knowing what the Rams do, they make a decision, they stick to it. If they make a mistake, they pivot very quickly. They don't let these decisions linger. And so the fact that Tutu Atwell is still on this roster, part of this team, tells me that they want to give him one more year to see what he can do. He showed us some flashes last year. There was that game, against the Cowboys at home where he caught one. There was the game at the Saints where he had the touchdown. And so, he teased us a little bit. I think I'm inclined to think that the Rams are going to give him one final year to prove himself. And for that reason, I'm going to pass on Dell, as crazy as that is, and go Tyjae Spears.
Yeah, phenomenal points there, because obviously Dell and Tutu are somewhat in the same ilk in terms of talent, size, speed, intangibles, all those things. And so, yeah, it's going to be a very real conversation if he's there. If do they believe in Tutu and what they've seen in limited action and what they've seen with the injuries, what they've seen in growth and maybe size expectations. And I agree with you, the fact that he is on this roster when they did basically a mass exodus of everyone else on the roster, but he was one that kept. Obviously, he's very cheap still, being on his rookie contract. But that does signify that they maybe even out of necessity are giving him just because they can't afford to pay anyone else. And it'd be interesting to draft a Tank Dell and keep both on the roster when they're literally the exact same style of player. So I do think this is a pick with these guys available that Sean McVay gets his juice pick. He always talks about wanting to draft juice, and you're going to get a lot of juice out of a guy named Tyjae Spears, or Deuce Vaughn for that matter, at the running back position, and different style runner for the most part than Kyren Williams, different style of runner than even Cam Akers, who probably would still go into the season potentially as the starter. But we've seen the Rams every year they draft a running back. I don't think it's going to be any different this year. So there's a chance they do wait to do running back, but a guy like Tyjae Spears, the talent he has, what he was able to do at Tulane, we mentioned what he did against USC and just dominating that game and taking over. And if the Rams can get their hands on a player of that caliber, and whether it's moving on from Cam Akers next season, and then you have the likes of Tyjae Spears and Isaiah Spiller, because as they do, they draft and move on, essentially, is what they kind of do things. So, yeah, I agree with you. To me, I think this pick is Tyjae Spears.
Yeah, Spears, Kyren Williams' future, Ryan, is just a very exciting one. And I think, that's where I think the excitement for the Rams here is. I don't think the draft could have broken any better for the Rams, given that they have their next 2-3 picks so bunched together in the second and third rounds, and given how the first round played out. That was maybe one of the wildest first rounds in recent memory when you talk about projection versus reality. And so many of the guys that we thought were either going to go higher went lower. So many of the guys that we thought were going to get drafted didn't. So, now the Rams are in this incredible situation where they have opportunities at guys that you never thought were imaginable. And it also makes you wonder, hey, do we want to trade back as much? Because now we have access to some top guys. The whole principle of trading back is you're going quantity over quality. If you've got really quality players at your disposal, you don't necessarily need the quantity. You're doing the quantity play because you're saying, well, I don't really necessarily believe in any one guy, so I'm going to hedge my bets and say, hey, listen, let me just have more picks out there. I need to fill out my roster, obviously, but it's a hedge mechanism. But if you have access to a guy like a Branch and Ojalaria and Clark Phillips and, a DJ Turner and a Michael Mayer and on the list you go, now it makes you sort of rethink, hey, do we really need to be as aggressive trading back? Because we're actually going to get first round level talent, potentially even in round 3. So very exciting time. And today's going to be just, edge of your seat, bite off your fingernails for the Rams.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, the fact of getting Ojalaria, Clark Phillips, and Tajay Spears, to me, that would be a great Friday for the Rams.
Oh, my God. Absolutely. Celebrating the streets, Rams fans. Absolutely. If that were the case.
I mean, you get two guys that will start next year as rookies in Ojalaria and Clark Phillips, and a guy in Tajay Spears that could end up being the best running back in the NFC, depending what happens with Christian McCaffrey, obviously, and if he's able to stay healthy. But Tajay Spears has elite level talent as well to be able to get him there. So it's going to be extremely exciting, Jamal. I love that they now have the draft in this format of day 1, just the first round, but then day 2, rounds 2 and 3 is almost, if not more fun for Rams fans because they actually have picks. But it's still the elongated primetime viewing of the draft, but you get 2 rounds instead of just the 1. So you get to see your team pick multiple times, unless obviously trades. So I think there's a lot to be excited about for this draft. This is a draft the Rams certainly have to nail if they want this remodel to go as expected. And we'll have plenty of coverage for you all day long, all weekend long, and post-weekend. So that is all the time we have, Rams fans. Enjoy the draft. For Jamal Madney, I'm Ryan Dyrud. This is the LA Football Show. Talk to you all here soon.
You're listening to the LA Football Podcast.